Hi and welcome to VCSP how-to videos. In this video, the topic is installing CDP I/O filter. This is a core component for replicating VMware virtual machines with a near zero RPO. In the following architecture, we see two vSphere clusters. We see a source cluster and a target cluster. Now, the same architecture also applies to VMware Cloud Director, so we could have a source VDC or we could have a target VDC, right? The required components in this case are the backup server, which holds the CDP coordinator service. We also have the I/O filter, left and right, source and target, which is deployed on the vSphere cluster, so on each ESXi host. And then we also have source and target VMware CDP proxies, and these hold the designated CDP proxy services. In the following architecture, we have a similar picture, right? But with Veeam Cloud Connect in between. So this scenario means that we are going to be the offsite disaster recovery site for the customer. And in this case, we are going to use VMware vSphere as a destination. So what we can see here is that we have a backup server at the customer's location, at the tenant, and we have a backup server at the service provider location, and each of them hold a coordinator service. Then also each of the clusters, the source cluster at the tenant, the target cluster at the service provider, hold their own I/O filters. And then again, each of the CDP proxies at source and target have their own CDP proxies and proxy services. So once this is set up, the customer can send the data with the lowest RPO possible from their location to the service provider location within the hardware plan specified. Now, if we have a similar setup, but then actually we replace plain vSphere and hardware plans with VMware Cloud Director, then the picture changes a little bit. So in this case, we're not using a hardware plan on the right, but we're using organization VDCs, virtual data centers, on which we will enable and thus install the I/O filter. The main difference here is that to be able to use an organization VDC for CDP is that you must install the I/O filter on each VDC where VApps reside, right? So then it will automatically deploy the I/O filter on all of the underlying clusters or hosts that are impacted. So, coordinator. What does the coordinator actually do in detail? So first of all, this is the component that lives on the backup server, right? On the server where Veeam Backup and Replication is installed. So this is called a top-level manager. So it rules everything. It creates the list of VM tasks that need to be processed. It checks the required infrastructure components, whether the proxies are available, whether the hosts are available, etc. It queries the virtual machines and virtualization hosts. It requests the vCenter to create the empty replicas, register them, apply CDP replication storage policies, and it also selects the proxies that will be used, applies network traffic throttling rules, for example, first physical machines, then CDP cluster on the same cluster, other proxies. Overall, it monitors the infrastructure for changes, right? So what is very important here is that this component, right, should be running at all times, right? So if anything underlying changes, it will be picked up automatically by the CDP coordinator service. Now, if the coordinator goes down, then everything will still work. So CDP policies that exist already, they will continue replicating. We will create and remove short-term restore points, but no long-term restore points will be created or removed because it's the coordinator who manages them. And if it's not available, it cannot manage them, right? Also, if any other components go out of service, like a CDP proxy goes offline or something hits vMotion, and because the coordinator is not available, it can't register these changes, you might receive error message until the coordinator service is repaired or back online. Now, the source filter. Right? The source filter is a component that runs on the ESXi host. So it is deployed automatically from the Veeam backup and replication server, and it intercepts the I/O requests from the virtual machines. So what we'll see is we will see one filter driver instance per virtual disk. So for example, if you would go and log in to one of the ESXi hosts and you would check for the filters, then this is what you would see. Next, we have a source daemon. So this component is one component per ESXi, and it communicates again with the coordinator. So this component gets the information about the proxy and the traffic route, right? So it will connect to the proxy over TCP, right? Not UDP, but TCP, because we need guaranteed delivery. All the data needs to be sent from A to B guaranteed. We need all of the data. So for example, this will be the component that will take the data and send it over a dedicated VM kernel interface if that is supposed to be used. Next, we have a target daemon and filter driver. So the daemon writes to the data store, and actually the filter driver on the target location, on the target cluster / ESXi host, stays inactive because it's not being used at this point. So the filter only gets enabled during failover. So then once we do failback, for example, the traffic will flow, then this filter driver will be enabled and the other one will be disabled. So for example, if we look on the ESXi host, then we can confirm that there's actually nothing running there at this point when replicating. Now, when it comes to the installation of the I/O filter driver, so for example, on a VMware vSphere cluster, it's actually very simple. It's just 4 steps, right? And the last one is just click finish. So first of all, we need to select the cluster on which we are going to deploy the I/O filter driver. So you cannot specify any host. It's always on the cluster level, right? So we click all the hosts or select all the hosts, all the clusters that need to be installed with the I/O filter driver. So for example, if we look at the VMware Cloud Director, then the difference here is that we don't see any clusters, but we actually select VDC organizations because they might be spread across multiple clusters, multiple hosts. Therefore, we specify the VDC organization, and then we can automatically have it deployed on the underlying clusters / hosts. Now, some considerations. So first of all, for VMware Cloud Director VDCs, if you create a new organization VDC, you must install the I/O filter manually on the newly added VDC. Otherwise, it will not be activated by default. Then, if you're using vSphere Lifecycle Management, VLCM, then actually the wizard will error out when deploying the I/O filter driver, and it will require remediation. Right? Here is the link with the KB article, but we'll show in the next slides how it actually looks like. Also, ownership, very important. Only one Veeam backup and replication server can own the cluster for CDP. So if there is already another server that owns the cluster and has installed the I/O filter driver on it, you will be prompted whether you want to take ownership of it or not. Updating or uninstalling. So whenever a new I/O filter driver is installed, there will be no maintenance mode, it will be just installed. But when updating or uninstalling, the host will be placed in maintenance mode. Now, if DRS is enabled on the cluster, then everything will go automatically. Just be aware of the fact that stuff will start moving around. If DRS is not enabled, then you need to set the host manually in maintenance mode. Otherwise, it will not proceed with updating or uninstalling. So just a quick look at the lifecycle management. So this is in fact how it looks when you're deploying the IO filter driver. So the message you will get is that the agent workflow is blocked until its required solutions are remediated externally in vSphere Lifecycle Manager. And we have a brilliant KB article about it. So when you have a look at it, it will say, like the message you see on the bottom, the cluster needs remediation to finish enabling the solutions, Veeam continuous data protection solutions for VMware ESXi, and etc. Right? So it will actually tell that you need to remediate this manually. It's actually very simple. So you go to the cluster, you go to the VLCM configuration, you check the compliance. Actually, it will set the message, right? Then you remediate. And once you remediate, so it will deploy everything consistently across every host in the cluster. You will see the message that all of the hosts have been remediated. Everything is complete. If you then check the wizard again, you will see that the cluster, actually the IO filter driver, is up to date, right? So if you, for example, after an installation, whether it's vSphere, right, or plain vSphere or with VLCM, you will see cluster is up to date. And if we have a look in the VMware vCenter on the cluster, you can go to configure IO filters, or you can also specify each individual host and see it there as well. Then you will see a component being installed or is installed vCDP, and that's actually the IO filter driver. Great, so that was it for the theory. Let's quickly have a look in the demo lab. So let's switch to the lab. And here we have the Veeam Backup and Replication console. So here we can see our vCenter on the left. And this vCenter we also have opened in the browser. You can see there is a cluster here, and it contains one host just for the demo purposes. So let's go back to the console and right-click, Manage IO Filters. And then we'll see that we have discovered several clusters here. And this is the cluster we are going to install the IO filter on. As you can see, it's not been installed yet. So press Next. We hit Yes. And then we wait for everything to be deployed automatically. So this process is actually very simple. Now, what is very important here to know is that DNS is absolutely critical, right? So each component, the vCenter, the ESXi host, the backup server, the proxies, they must all be able to resolve each other over DNS. If one of the components has an issue with DNS, this is the moment where it will fail, right? So then the IO installation will not continue. You'll probably get some error. And 99% of the time, it is related to DNS. So let's just wait here for a couple of seconds, and then we can see when the installation has completed. Perfect. Now with the magic of video editing, we can see that everything was successfully installed, right? So we can see that the cluster meets the installation requirements, that the configuration of the coordinator has been done. Everything actually has run successfully. So we can also go and have a look in the VMware cluster. So if we click on the cluster, then on the host, we can go to configure IO filters, and there we will see that the IO filter actually has successfully installed. Great. So if we click next, then finish, and then we open again the wizard, then we can confirm that the IO filter is up to date and has successfully been installed. So this is the moment where then you can go and set up your backup proxies and start creating CDP policies. Great. Thanks for watching this demo. Have a nice day.